Dystopia tonight. Dystopia tonight.
Hey.
Hey, what's up?
How are you? Thank you for
Good.
having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Glad
Did
to
we
be here.
did we ever meet before? Because I feel like I would have remembered.
No clues. No
I know.
clues.
I know exactly. I feel the same. I don't see that there's any reason why we wouldn't have, but I mean, who knows?
Well, there's so many comedians now. Like there's, you can't remember every person unless you have a personal interaction or you happen to be in the room when they're on stage. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because sometimes,
And
like, there's so many new comedians coming up. You'll be in a room and you're like, "Fuck, dude, I don't know who's a comedian or who's the audience. Like, I don't know."
yeah, exactly. And they also just happen to look like the dudes who are working the room too, who are also sometimes comedians. And you're just like, oh. I'll give you a hint though. I'm the one with hair. I feel like not a lot of comedians, male comedians, have any hair left, which is what I keep hearing all the time.
True.
Which I'm just gonna jinx myself at this point, but hopefully it sticks around. I don't know. So what? I loved the Comedy Store documentary that you were in. Were you part of that whole process, like putting it together, or like did it hit during did your stuff hit when COVID hit? Was there a delay for that? Like what was?
Oh, he filmed it because I think he tinkered on it for a bit. So that was all filmed pre-COVID. And then unless maybe some of the wraparound stuff was filmed at the very beginning. But yeah, he's a great guy. I'm glad that it was made and got to see people represented in it that you don't normally always see. And so it was a good time, He knew what he was asking. He knew the right questions. Because sometimes people do a comedy documentary and you're like, you have no idea. You know what I mean? But no, obviously he came up through that Comedy Store system as a young man in the 70s. Or early 80s, late 70s. So he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, that's one of the way I love when comedy documentaries are done by comics, or at least like there's another guy. Do you know the author Richard Zoglin?
Who?
His name is Richard Zoglin, and he had a book called oh my god, I'm gonna fucking forget the name now, but it was a comedy book that came out a few years ago. But he was one of the reporters, I guess, around at the time during the Comedy Store when the Improv were really big, like when they were just starting out. Yeah. When the strike was going, yeah. And that was cool too. Like whenever it's somebody who's been like around it a lot or just personally involved in it, I always find like it's 10 times better than when it's like somebody who's just winging it.
Because they get all the nuances. They understand all the players and how important each little part of the puzzle is,
Yeah. And one of the things I loved, and I thought the timing was great too, because it did hit during the pandemic, was like there was all this talk about whether comedy was going to, survive the pandemic. And then when you watch that documentary, you just see decade after decade of people going, comedy's dead. It's back. It's dead. It's back.
Right.
So it was cool to see.
Like during the pandemic, I don't know why people bitch so much about Zoom shows because they served a purpose. I mean, it wasn't my favorite thing to do, but it certainly served a purpose and just keeping the gears grinding,
Yeah, it did serve. I know exactly what you mean. They weren't Tom can attest to this. They weren't my favorite thing. I got convinced. I didn't get convinced to do one, but I misunderstood what was going on. That we did a charity gig, and this dude who donated the most money got to have his favorite comics from the event, like in a special thing for him, like to put on a show. But I thought it was just going to be people shooting the shit. And then Tom and I were talking. He's like, "Hey, you got a set to do in 8 minutes?" And I was like, "No, I don't." He was like, "Yeah, you do."
You do.
And I was like, "Fuck!" And then, but it's they were fun, and you're right. That was cool too, because comedians, I feel like I don't know how it's gonna pan out now that everything's opening up again. I feel like all the assholes are digging their way back out of the dirt. But it just felt like we were the ones that survived while every other business kind of failed. And it's like, oh, without us, I guess you're not so much. But
Right. No, I mean, it's definitely was psychologically such an interesting thing to go through. Like, am I going to age out? Am I still going to be relevant? Is my voice still going to count? Like, does it matter what I say? Because everything shifted. So, yeah. But the great thing was that it made everybody on the same playing field. You know what I mean? Like, you could experiment and do whatever you wanted because you didn't feel like you were losing a step time-wise, you know?
Yeah, and I really do miss that because as we're coming out of it, I'm like, I think I have like a post-pandemic funk.
Yeah, it's scary. Am I gonna get a spot? Like when the comedy store start doing spots, I'm gonna be like 6 months before I get a spot because there's gonna be a juggernaut of all these people who can sell tremendous tickets, you know. But then you
Yes.
get one and you're like, okay, it's all good.
Right.
It's all good.
Yeah, I know. I did feel a little bit of relief. I'm doing my first set back because I'm fully vaccinated, so I got a set in the city next week. But also, they just told me that I was closing out the show, and I was like, why?
I know. I have a set at the Laugh Factory. He's like, you're doing 20 minutes, and I'm like, what? I can do 12 now.
I know.
You know, so.
And they told the only reason why anybody even bothered to tell me that now is because they were like, hey, you're not plugging the show. And I was like, well, I'm only doing like 5 minutes, not my show. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, I kind of wanted to sneak in, sneak out. And they were like, oh, you're closing it. And I was like, oh, okay. No.
Well, I was just in New York and I did a set for 2 sets at the Stand. One was for Carol Montgomery, who does Women of a Certain Age.
Love
right?
Carol Montgomery. Yeah, she's a good friend.
Yeah, she's awesome. But the crowd is very genteel and they're here to see women of a certain age. And then they call me up and they're like, hey, you want to do the Monday show? And you get there and it's like every killer in fucking New York City. And you're like, what? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I can't follow Aaron Berg. Are you insane?
Yeah.
But it was a good wake-up call, you know?
Oh, I know. It is good to get out there and get in front of people who are just fucking dominate because you're...
Oh, yeah.
It's humbling, and then you need to have your faith in your own abilities questioned, reaffirmed every.
Oh, constantly.
Yeah, I was just talking to Mark Brazil today about because he's doing the what's it called? I just blanked on it. The one in the round that they got, the new one that's
oh yeah,
Mark
I went and saw
looking.
him the last time he did that in Hollywood. It has like a solar, like it has like some kind of space oriented name, like
solar.
Yeah, that's a great show.
It looks so cool.
They have the killer lineups on that show.
It's like the lineup that's on that show is Bill Burr, Tim Dillon,
Nikki Glaser,
yes, and Mark, and then a couple other, and I'm just like, what a fucking crazy ass lineup! It's nuts.
Yeah, I want to say to Mark, you're gonna have to write a pilot for the Booker. You know, that's how crazy that lineup is. You have to write that motherfucker a show.
I know. Holy shit! It was just I just couldn't believe the lineup, but it's incredible. That's one of the cool things I think that's coming out of this is like I feel like people are more willing to just cram their friends into like all the good ones and all the good people into shit, and you know, I was talking about that. Like before, where I was like, are any of us getting famous at the in Boise, Idaho when we go out for a gig? No, then let's just all go out together and have fun. Like,
yeah, those are called comedy festivals. You know?
I know.
Come on out to Idaho, but I'm not making money. But okay.
Yep. I don't know. I think that's why I said Idaho because there's a festival out there now, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's so weird to me that they because I was thinking about that and I remember doing comedy festivals and I remember they used to be you know they'd be fun to do them or whatever. It's much better if you're closing out and getting money for it or whatever. But I was like, my God, like how many comics are driving or traveling to Boise, fucking wherever it is in Idaho, for no money to do a short set to meet other comics to get on their podcast.
Because you have to put that's why I went last week. I was in New York and Austin. You have to remind people, oh yeah, here I am.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. And that's the thing that people I don't think appreciate or understand about. Like I think most people, especially on the outside, just think comedians just have their material and they get to go and travel and do their shit.
It's magical.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like we were talking about the other day, where we're like we're editing our own fucking shit, posting stuff online, hustling constantly 24/7. It's like, no, I wish I could work on material, but I'm too busy trying to figure out how to make a GIF.
Oh my God, when I first started comedy, you could have the same act and float for 10 years. You didn't have to write a script. You didn't have to do your podcast. You just had to show up in El Paso with that 45 minutes in your pocket for a decade.
Yeah. Isn't there like a Mitch Hedberg joke where he was talking about, he'll go into audition for someone as a comedian and be like, "You're really funny. Can you write a script?" It's like, "No." And then I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the whole thing, but he'd be like, that's like going up to a chef and be like, "You're a great cook. Can you weld?" Or like, something like that. And it's like hilarious.
By the way, he did write a script and he did make a movie and it got into Sundance.
Oh shit. Oh, that's fucking, I never knew that.
Yeah. I was the assistant director on that movie.
No
it was
way.
called Los Enchiladas. It had Mark Maron, David Tell, had so many comedians in it.
Can you see it anywhere?
I don't know. I bet you could find pieces of it on YouTube. It's called Los Enchiladas.
That is crazy. I will definitely look that up. I never knew he did that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So so I'm going to ask you generic questions if you don't mind.
Okay,
I don't know too much. Yeah, let's do it up. Oh, I thought you had a cat. It's a person. Sorry.
No, it's my son kissing the dog.
Oh, okay.
I'm on camera. Yeah. Just thought he didn't bring his bong over as he did it.
Nice. Very nice. Respectable. Love it. So when did you who was your comedy class when you started out?
I'm sorry, what?
Who was your comedy class when you started out doing stand-up? Do you remember the people that you were all with?
Well, I started pretty young. I was much younger than everyone. I started when I was 18 and in Colorado. And at that time, there was a woman comic named Roseanne Barr out of Denver, Colorado. So I was pretty friendly with her at that time, but she was older. She already had a family and kids.
Right.
And but when I moved to Los Angeles, I was made a regular when I was 21 at the Comedy Store, and out of that class, that's might have been Carlos Mencia, people like that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think who else did well at that time. I know Judy Gold came around the same time, but she was more of a New York comic, but she did work for a long time at the LA Comedy Store. So Carol Montgomery came, but she was a few years before me. And so Margaret Cho was 2 or 3 years after. So it was right around that time. Yeah. Cool. I was made a regular in 1985.
Wow, that's awesome. Holy shit. That was how
dare I come on here without makeup?
No, you look amazing. I don't even know if you're not taking any. You're I don't believe any of you. I hate all of you.
I know. So what were you saying?
No, I was gonna say the comedy class thing. I keep talking about that with comedians on here because it always fascinates me because I really do wish I had a timeline of events because it seems like some of them tend to blur. You said you got passed in 85 or you were a regular at the club or whatever. And then I feel like after that, you're just thrown in with everybody, the whole mix. And I feel like now there's more of a...
now because there's so many more comedians. At that time, there really wasn't a lot of women that were doing comedy. And at the Comedy Store, her thing at that time was, do I have this type? Do I have this type? She was looking at it who is not represented here? And so I kind of slid in because she didn't have, a young dummy girl, what I mean? Because my comedy at the time was hey, everybody, I was such a ditz, because I was so young, But she really was into a type, and and because the guys then at the Comedy Store were so much older than me, then when the alternative scene happened, I kind of got lumped in with the old guys, even though the alternative scene was more my age, but because I was so present in such a big venue, and club at the time, I kind of got dumped, lumped into with the older
With
comedians,
the older
older style of comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, because
But at
when I
that
think
time,
of
it was
no, I was gonna say when I think of that, I do imagine you with a totally different class of comedians. You know what I mean? Like because you were, I guess, because of that Comedy Store effect.
right, because if you worked the Comedy Store, you didn't really at that time you didn't really work the improv. A little bit at the Laugh Factory because that's the Laugh Factory is really small and new at that time, so it wasn't a
Hmm.
threat to the Comedy Store or the improv. So people that worked at the Comedy Store and the improv would sometimes converge at the Laugh Factory, and then he grew that into being what it is today, which is definitely a threat,
Yeah,
club
absolutely.
wise. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Was there somebody had told me that basically like the Comedy Store back then, if you were to compare the Comedy Store and the improv, Mitzi really set it up where there wasn't any like it was male female, like as far as the lineups would go, like if there was like that, but as soon as you got out of there, they did kind of stigmatize it and have it was there was only like one woman on a show at the other clubs. Did you notice a lot of that at the time, or
Well, when you look at the old lineups at the Comedy Store, it wasn't like guy, girl, guy, girl, guy, girl. It
oh,
certainly
okay.
wasn't that, but it was like 3, 4 chicks on a lineup all through the night, which was a lot. That was a
Mm,
lot because you'd go to the improv, maybe there was one chick, you know what I mean?
wow.
And and the Comedy Store was more about street comics. It was more character driven comedy, you know what I
Mm,
mean? Where the improv was more like guys who came out of it through, like Ivy League schools or through college and through a more educated sense of, show business and comedy and writing, so there was a difference where like the Comedy Store at that time like had Sam Kinison, it had people
yeah.
that were more character driven,
Right.
so even though they had Argus did the Tonight Show a buttload of times, Argus
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Yeah, he's a staple. I met him when I was there. I lived in LA for 2 years, and Argus is one of the first people I met, and he was he's a cool dude, and he's super fucking tall, and I'm super short, so it was just like always
Right.
like
Argus
it's
tried to sell me to Paul Rodriguez once for a bindle of coke. I don't even think Paul Rodriguez knew that, but that's how much Argus loved cocaine.
oh my god!
Yeah,
Did you know it was
we-
happening at the time, or were you like the fuck?
yeah, because we were standing in the back hallway, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go party with Paul Rodriguez?" I look, and Paul's in his Porsche, like revving it in the driveway, right? And I'm all like, "No." I don't think Paul had any idea, but Argus was going to make it happen.
Wow! Holy
No,
shit!
he talks openly about it. I wouldn't tease him if he didn't talk
Right.
openly about it. So
Oh,
yeah.
of course. Yeah, I know. You have to
Yeah.
put that little preface at the end of it and be like, nobody cancel Argus.
No, Argus is no, it was the time. That was the
Yeah.
time, Yeah, for sure. And I actually came to comedy through I was a stripper when I was 18. And
Right.
I'm so grateful I had that experience because I mean the Comedy Store was just a den of vipers, you know what I mean? And so I was
Mhm.
able to talk back to the guys and not feel, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
afraid to, because I'd
Yeah.
been working at a strip club.
Is that what made your transition into like the more like kind of like a bluer material? Because you said when you started out, you were kind of innocent, very ditzy with your act, and then but you did have a turn at some point. Was it because of the background in strip clubs and everything, and like you had a little
Well,
bit of a natural edge to you?
at that time, I mean, if you're like I was 21 in the clubs, the average age of the audience probably 32. Like what,
Mhm.
what are and there weren't a lot of women. So what am I going to say that I have in common
Right.
with grown ass adults, even though I'm legally adult, but I'm like 21. And so
I'm 36 and I
only
still feel that way.
oh no. And when I went to New York, I actually moved to New York for about a decade. And I remember I was in New York, I was probably at the comic strip, and I was like, "Hey, everybody, I'm Felicia Michales." And they were like, "What the fuck is this?" And I was like, "Thank you." I totally cured it. But,
Oh my
yeah, I
god.
mean, it is what it is. So there you go.
That's incredible. Would you have gone? Have you talked to Paul Rodriguez about the Coke exchange? Do you think he would
No,
have been
because
like,
I'm sure it was all Argus's craziness, like,
Sure.
hey, Paul said if you come party with us, he's gonna give me a bundle of coke. And it was like, Paul probably never said that. It was just Argus hoping to get a bundle of coke somewhere.
I came into I started doing comedy when I was 20, and literally all the guys that I used to work with, like headliners, would tell me all the stories about how they used to get paid in coke. They'd be like bags of coke, cash, and the food used to be great. And I'd be like, well, thanks. I feel like I'm starting at the worst possible fucking time, which I guess all the fun had ended after that. But it still seems like another world to me, because even like when I was growing up, like reading like all the comedy books, I was a huge comedy nerd. But like that just seemed like, did you realize how much fun it was, or did you think it was fucked up?
So it's an interesting thing because when I was a stripper, I never did drugs. That was like that was my one thing. Like, if I do drugs, I'm fucked. You know what I mean? Like, I have to be level-headed here. And I didn't do it very long. I did it, I think, 2 years maybe at the most. But when you see, it's weird to hear the word fun connected to that, because the people, that was like Kinnison and all those guys, and they were doing, when you're around people that you're working with and they haven't slept in 3 days, and they're calling you to take them to the airport, and you see them coked out of their minds in an ugly way. It's, and at that time I was dating Alan Stevens. He was a lot older than me. And
oh my God, yeah. I've had him on the show too.
Yeah, he's awesome. He was one of the Outlaws. And I remember one time he called me up and he's like, hey, we're all going to Vancouver because Kinnison has a theater date, and we're going to rent some vans and party and drive up to Vancouver. And even as a 22-year-old at the time, I was like, yeah, doesn't seem like such a great idea to do a bunch of cocaine and drive over the Rocky Mountains with you fucks going over an international border. Like, I don't know. I was never that, I enjoyed myself, but it just wasn't my thing, so.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like that wouldn't have been, I don't think that would have been my thing either when I was, do you know Angel Salazar?
Oh my God. One time at the La Jolla Comedy Store, I was in the dressing room at the La Jolla Comedy Store, right? And so I'm like brushing my hair, putting on makeup, and then I was looking in the mirror to where Angel was, the reflection. And Angel, there was a girl coked out of his mind. There was a girl that was combing his hair, and there was another girl tying his shoes, right? And I was looking at him like, look at this motherfucker, right? And he sees me do it, and he's like, baby, you want some of this? And I was like, no.
Oh my God. Yeah. And knowing
he had
his
a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, there was one. I didn't know him too well. I'd gotten to know him over the years, but I'd opened for him a bunch when he was in the area, Bananas or whatever. And I picked him up a couple of times, whatever. But one of the first times I'd worked with him, I didn't know the extent of the stories, right? And the club owner or the manager or whatever at the time was a good friend, and she was just like, yeah, just whatever. Like, if he doesn't show, he might, if he's on stage, you might need to stay on stage a little longer if he doesn't show up in case he disappears. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she was like, and I was like, okay. So anyway, I'm on stage, I'm doing my thing, and she comes up, like, we're with an eye shot of the stage or whatever, but she completely fucks up and mixes up the signals. So she's trying to tell me to stretch it. Instead, she's doing this. So I'm like, oh, and I'm like not done yet, but I'm like, oh, okay. I guess he wants, I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, all right, everybody, I'm going to wrap it up. Like, I'm going to bring it out. And she's like, no. And then she's doing this even harder. And I'm like, all right, Denise, I'm getting off stage. Relax. And she's like, no. She's like, whatever it means, just keep going. Whatever this one is. And I was like, oh my God. So like I wind up going long, and he's MIA because he's doing coke or whatever. So they finally find him, they drag him on stage, and then later that night he's got a bunch of his friends are there, and he's like, hey man, like, we're all getting in a limo. He's like, you gotta come with us, we're going out. And he like grabs me to take me like with him in the limo, and Denise comes up behind me, and I was like 22 probably. She comes behind me, just grabs me, and she's like, she goes, you go with them, you will never be seen again. I Oh, all right. I was like, I don't know what to, I'm like, I think I'm just gonna probably go home or stay the night or whatever. But it was hilarious
Right.
because she just like immediately was like, "Do not go. You will not
Yeah.
come back." And I was like, oh, "All right." So yeah,
Well,
that
by
was
the
my only.
way, he was a dynamo on stage. Like
Yes,
when he was at the height of it, like he was fun to watch. I mean,
he's
you know,
still
you
fun to
can't take
watch.
yeah, you can't take that away from him for sure.
No, and his audience, they love him. Like there's like his audience is so friendly, so nice, and they wait for it. Like it's that was one of the coolest things to see when I was younger too. So when I got to work with like guys like him, and even like who had specific audiences when they came out, like it was just cool to see that if you just hung around long enough, people would love you, still come out to see you, and they would I don't know, he seemed to love it. Like he didn't get tired of it.
Right,
So
right.
it was just fucking cool as shit. Do you remember now like what your first paid gig was on the road?
Wow, that's a good question.
It's always a tough
Because
one for people, but I always I like finding out the answer if they remember.
I would say like where it made a difference in my life.
Okay.
Uh, because it's if you're making 25, $50,
Right,
but
right.
where it made a difference in my life
Hmm.
was uh, getting at the Comedy Store, and then she sent me to La Jolla, and then she sent me to Vegas, and I
Oh wow.
maybe was doing comedy a handful of years, and I was working in Vegas, and I only had to do like 7 minutes, and you got
Wow.
paid like $2,000. Like I was 22 years old in a time when a dollar was worth three times the amount.
Yeah.
Make it so I never had to have a job. So I got that gig like once a month or once every 5 weeks because I was on the rotation. So
Hmm.
I would say that. But the first time I played there, it was before I was ready because I was so green, and I might have been 21 at that time, and I was working with a guy named Ollie Joe Prater and Charlie Hill.
Hmm.
And do you know these guys at all?
No.
Charlie Hill, there's a guy named Cliff Nesterson
Hmm.
who wrote a book called We Have a Real Estate Problem. And Charlie Hill was one of the first American Indian comedians other than Will Rogers, but that's actually was one of a punchline to one of his jokes. And he was like the first American Indian on the he passed a couple years ago, but he was first American Indian on the Tonight Show. He was on Richard Pryor's show.
Wow.
Like he was, a big monumental comic in that sense. And then Ollie Joe Prater was this pretty hefty guy, a party guy, big party guy, big like one of the original Road Dogs. And
Wow.
he had a beard and a cowboy hat, and yeah, so I worked with those guys, and I didn't have I just wasn't ready. And I remember after my set, she had me go into the dressing room, and she was like, "You're not ready." And I was all like, "I know, but I wanted to show you that I had the balls to do it because I knew I wasn't ready."
Right.
And she was like, "No, no, no, it's not your fault, it's my fault." And then the next morning, because you even get at those times, you got like a limo ride back and forth to the airport and stuff.
Wow.
I had a limo ride back to the airport after I was fired. And I turn around and they were taking my name off the thing. I was
Oh.
all like, showbiz,
That's rough.
21 in their showbiz. But she
Oh
kept her
God.
word. She kept her word, and I like had the 8 o'clock spot for the next year, worked La Jolla, and then the following year, when I was around 22, I had that gig for a good solid 7 years. I mean, that changed my
Wow.
life. That changed my life. Yeah.
Wow. Do you remember the first thing you bought with the money that you were making at the time that was like out of your, you know what I mean? Like since you were making that kind of money at the time, what was like the first lavish thing you got yourself?
A 1969 Ford Mustang, bitch. That's what I got.
That's,
Golden with a rag top, a golden rag top, and
wow.
gold leather seats. Yeah.
Goodbye. That's fucking awesome.
It was not a fastback. I think it was more of a coupe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's sick. That's a great buy. Some people
Yeah.
are like a house, and I'm like, oh, cool, that's nice. But that's a great buy. What was it like for the rest of the so after you had done that, did that open up a bunch of doors for you, or were you still comfortable around like the LA area doing that kind of stuff? Because like you also did some acting and stuff too. But I'm always
Yes.
curious the transition between going, I'm done doing the road and I want to do more of this, or
Well,
was it?
I did the road, because I had that gig, I didn't really do the road till the end of my 20s. Like I did
Mhm.
some stuff like
Right.
Phoenix. I did like California, Arizona, a little bit of Texas. Like I was pretty friendly with the Austin Comedy Bench that first came out, which was a very strong bench. Had like guys like Howard Kramer, had Johnny Hardwick, a guy named Joey Walden, a bunch of guys like that, and Tom Hester, who was a friend, and started doing comedy in high school along with Bill Hicks, who was also in high school.
Oh, wow.
And so
Wow.
it was a bunch. Yeah, so I middled and stuff like that. But then I won Star Search when I was like 28,
In 1991.
29. Right. And exactly. And then that elevated me to be a headliner. And then I worked the next decade, 35 weeks a year for a decade. Yeah, it was a
Wow.
lot. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Hard runs, like 10 weeks at a time. Like,
Mhm.
Yeah, that fucking
Who'd
sucked.
you beat out on Star Search?
I beat out, well, because the way they did it, I mean, if we're going to talk Star Search, right? The way they did, that's so lame to even say out loud. But the way they did it is they would shoot two sections, like two blocks of shows. So they would shoot, I might be off here and there, but they would shoot like a big block in the, like, let's say late spring, early summer. And then you would work you would compete against each other. And then whoever went to the semifinals of that depended on how many episodes you had won, or if you were the last one that had won, and then you guys were in the semifinals. And then they did at the end of the year, they did, like, let's say late fall, they did the same thing. And then they would have the semifinalists from the spring and then the fall, and then a couple of weeks would go by, and then you would go into the semifinals and finals. So in the semifinals, when I did it, was Carrot Top, Bob Zaney, and a girl named Leslie Norris.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Bob Zaney went against Carrot Top. And so here's the stupid thing about Star Search. The old comics, like if you talk to Mark Brazil's like, oh God, what is Larry? He had a show on Larry Wilmore. He's like, fucking Larry Wilmore beat me out in Star Search. He actually said this to me a couple of weeks ago. I was like, bitch, you created the 70s show. Shut the fuck up. Like, who cares about fucking Star Search, right? But they still get like that. They still get all like, remember in 1990 when it's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
That's exactly how the conversation started about who won in 91, because it was we were talking to Joey Cola. Oh my God, George.
It was about
Melvin George, and somebody else. I can't remember who the hell else was on there, but Rob Bartlett. And they all started talking about Star Search, and they were all arguing about who beat who and whatever. And then for some reason, 91 came up, and then they were like, who won in 91? And then, it went from there, whatever.
Yeah, it's so silly. Anyway, so Bob Zaney went against Carrot Top once against the ridiculous sentence. and Bob Zaney, they both did props, right? So so Carrot Top does this thing. Bob Zaney goes to pull out like a balloon prop, and the balloon breaks, right?
Oh no.
Something like that. So he was knocked out. So I don't know how it happened, but I went against this girl named Leslie Norris, and she hasn't done, I think she might still do comedy, but it's very local and in the South, like lovely lady. But she was also very blonde and cutesy and had kind of the same spiel that I did. And so look at the draw in the finals. She came from the spring, so she had fucking 6 months to be like $100,000, because that's what you won, right?
Right.
Whereas it kind of happened real quick. It was just one of those weird things that it happened super quick with me. So I was just like, all right, $100,000, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But she, and here's the thing, I was a filthy comic. Star Search was the apple pie show of America, right? I had no clean jokes. I remember comedians were coming up to me and being like, you can borrow some of my jokes. Like, people were on the down low, like, bitch, you ain't gonna win. You gotta borrow some of my jokes. And there was a part of me where I was like, I should borrow some jokes, because I was literally like, you ever notice when you're sucking a guy's dick? Like, that was from the get-go, right? But I was like, no, I'll never hear the end of it. Everybody already thinks I'm an idiot. I better not do it. And then she goes first, right? I thought she had a very nice set. I go, it was okay, right? So, but I thought, well, she, like Bob, Zany, and Carrot Top, had the luck of the draw that she got to go first.
Right.
So after we did our sets and reset cameras and everything, and then we're in the dressing room. I'm in a dressing room and she's right next to me. And I knock on the door and I'm like, Leslie, I just wanted to be the first one to say, I think you won and congratulations. Like, I think it's going to go your way. And then she looked at me and she was like, it's all in God's hands now. And I thought to myself, fuck you, bitch. I'm going to win Star Search. No one escapes it, right?
Right.
And then I accidentally win, right? By some, I don't know what was going on. And I win. And then I was in the dressing room later with my handsome boyfriend that I had, a new boyfriend, and we were drinking champagne. I could hear her crying in her room. And I was all like, bad bitch.
It's in God's hands.
I guess
it was in God's hands. And he said, no. It was so dumb. So dumb.
Oh my God. That's fucking great. And then so from Star Search, then that was it, man. And that was like your Carson.
Yes, sadly so. Sadly so.
But
Yeah, it was a great experience because it made me a headliner. It put a big chunk of change in my pocket. I got to headline. It really gave me an opportunity. That when I got to go to New York, I got that opportunity. I went and I made short films and I did the whole spiel. I'm not an actress. I didn't care for doing that kind of stuff, but it was a blessing for sure.
Hang on. Sorry.
I'll tell you a funny story about
please.
Star Search. Oh, is it okay?
I'm back. Yeah.
Go right in.
Cherry Pie, that song. She's not Bobby Brown, who was in that. Remember that?
Yeah.
The blonde girl, right?
Yeah.
She was on Star Search on my episodes, and she made it into the finals for model spokesperson. And at the finals, and Ed McMahon is all like, okay, Bobby Brown. And she goes, you have to do a little speech, like model spokesperson speech. But she fucks up. And then she stops. And we all know she's thinking they're going to reset the cameras. And there's this long, awkward moment. And then Ed McMahon goes, I'd like to remind the contestants that this is actually a competition. She don't win.
Holy shit. That's fucking great. So you do Star Search, whatever, you start becoming a headliner. And then from that point on, when did you start to branch out into you started doing a little bit of writing, you started acting and stuff like that? Was that a smooth transition or just something that you were like, I'm ready for the next step? Like, how did that process work for you?
Well, I had got, at that time they were giving a lot of TV deals away. They still give those away, but at that time it was like insanity. It was like Bitcoin, right? It was like craziness. It made no sense. You had 5 minutes, you had $250,000 holding deal. I never got that much money, but I had like 5 holding deals, and I had a pilot. And so a guy named Stan Daniels, I had written a pilot and I had written a part for Dom Irrera. So after I'd won,
I love Dom.
I just happened to write it. I didn't know what I was doing. So after I'd won Star Search, I got this manager named Michael Rotenberg, and he knew Dom Irrera. And so he was able to make something happen at HBO, which was HIP Productions or something like that. And and then everything kind of shifted, and then they brought over the one of the writer creators of Taxi, that show Taxi.
Yep.
And so I did make a pilot, but it didn't get picked up.
Oh.
So yeah, so I mean it happens to a lot of people. So
holding deals back then, that was just networks going, hey, we like you, we don't know what we want to do with you, but we have you if we need. Is that what that is?
It can be anything. It can be like, we want to develop with you. It can be exactly like you're saying, we like you, but we want to maybe cast you in something, or it could be we just give a big deal to someone else, so we're going to give you a little baby deal, giving you hope, but then we're just kind of sidelining you for a little bit. So it could be any combination of that. And so, like, through one of my deals, it got satisfied from doing some episodes of Full House. I did a few episodes of. That's when I realized I'm not an actress.
Did you not like doing it, or you just didn't think you did well?
It just wasn't my jam. I mean, it was fine, like, but if I would have done it, I just realized I wasn't going to shine at it. Like, it'd be okay, but it just wasn't my comfort zone. And when I would do any kind of acting, I would always think, oh, I wonder what the camera guy's thinking. And that's when I started to pick up a lot of photography and started doing a little bit of filmmaking and stuff like that, because that felt more to my desires.
Yeah, I like your photography, by the way. I looked up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think it was the last time we spoke, you told me. I didn't know you were also a photographer, but I love when comedians have like other artsy interests, because I feel like comedians, when they do other things, there's still that comedian, you know what I mean? There's still that like inner whatever in them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
or when people
essence.
like a lot of comedians who are actual artists who paint.
Yes.
Like,
oh my God. Yeah. I know the ones that can paint, man. I draw a cartoon. Like, I do cartoons, and I've had some in like magazines or whatever, because I wanted to be either a comedian or a cartoonist when I was younger. Those are the only two things. So I drew, I put a book out or whatever, but the ones that can paint always blow me the fuck away, because I've never been able, or maybe, I don't know why, painting was never my thing. And but whenever I see another comedian who can paint, like Jim Carrey, who does those paintings and has that whole fucking studio, and I mean, it's the weirdest shit, but it blows me away. And then, and then finding out that there's other comedians who just have like those little weird talents and stuff like that, like they just like to draw and stuff, always blows me away.
Yes, so I like a lot of my musicians. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Is there one that you like more than the other?
One what?
Like is there one skill that you have that you really just would like, if I could just do this, if this is how I want to go out, I just want to do this one thing?
Wow. I think right now I'm working on a book. Like,
nice. Definitely, for sure.
Like, if I got run over tomorrow by a bus, I'd be like, oh, I didn't finish my book. You know what I mean? Like, no, seriously.
That's perfect. Well, this is Dystopia, so we like to know those questions. That's great. You'd be more upset about the book. That's not bad. You wouldn't be like, I have that set at the stand. But
no. I'd be like, oh, fuck the book. Which I've been working on forever.
What's the book? Can you talk about what it's about or not yet?
It's a novel. I do want to do a photo book with comedy essays. That's going to be the next one after that. Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't get a chance to. I didn't see your documentary Pervs. But what can you talk about that a little bit and what it's about? What made you want to do it?
Sure. If you look on the screen and you see the poster for that, I had met this comedian named Susanna Lee, and we actually met at like the Ventura Comedy Club or something in the green room, and I just saw she's all tatted up, just very fascinating. Person. Like, when you meet her, you're like, what is going on there? Right. And I, like, a year later, I had photographed her, but I always remembered her because she was so unusual looking and beautiful and old school looking, and coming from a stripping background, you see it when you see it, and so I was on like a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter actually, and I saw she was looking for someone to fund her project, which was interviewing comedians while she would strip for them in the last working peep show in the Los Angeles County area, which is on Lancashire Boulevard in the Valley. And it wasn't that much money, and I had made short films and stuff, and I was like, that is just fascinating. So I funded the film, but I was like, I had emailed her and said, look, I'll fund this film, but I want to direct it. And so she was like, fuck yeah. So then we filmed at this place called the Venus Fair. It's on Lancashire, and it's a trip. When you go in there, it's like the old school, put the dollar in the machine and curtain goes up and down. So it's interviewing people about deviance. And so we got all these comedians like, Solomon Giorgio, Laurie Kilmartin, Baron Vaughn, Joey Diaz, Felipe Esparza, like just a shitload of comedians. And there's like 35, 40 comics in it. And just talking on the subject of deviance. We got Rick,
Overton?
No. He's a New York guy. It's going to drive me crazy that it doesn't come up because he was so amazing in the film. Because originally it was going to be a web series. And then he's like, he has a twin.
Oh, that's who I thought you were talking about too, and I was like, no way.
Street comic,
Shapiro.
I'm so sorry that I couldn't remember because he is amazing.
He's great. He's a great dude. Yeah.
He is amazing. And when she interviewed him, he had, unbeknownst to me and her, he was a sex worker when he started out, like the Ramones kind of lifestyle in New York City as a kid.
Yeah.
And when he talked so honestly and bravely and open about it, that, because the idea of the web series is it was going to be funny and light, and it didn't fit in the web series format of what we were going for. But the more I thought about it, I was like, no, I think this is a documentary, and I think it's really important to keep Rick Shapiro in it. And so then it just became a documentary instead of a web series. And when you make projects and you put your friends in it that are comedians and you sit tight for 5 years, everyone took off, it's an amazing thing,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Leah, Rick, I was wondering if you were talking about Rick, and then I didn't want to throw a name out there. But yeah, he's got a crazy, crazy interesting life. I'm gonna have to check it out because I don't know the full detail of that story, but I knew, some of it from working with him back in the day. Yeah, he and his brother.
Well, she was afraid to interview him because he can be, chaotic, but that's his brand, And he was the complete opposite, and so kind and giving. And they, like, you could see they had an understanding of how deviance can control your life, and not always in the best way.
He is very kind. And that's but he all right. His brand is very chaotic or whatever. When I was younger and I was starting out, and I think I was only doing it for a year. I was at the Improv in New York, and it was before it became Broadway. And he was on stage, and I was backstage waiting to go on, and I leaned against the wall like a moron and shut the light off. And then unbeknownst to me,
fuck you. I mean, who does that?
It gets worse. Unbeknownst to me, they had been lighting Rick for the last 10 minutes trying to get him off stage because he was going long. And then I do that, and he goes, oh, now they're fucking shutting the light off on me. Now I'm not fucking going anyway. And I was just like, oh my God. And so the MC at the time is like, you motherfucker. Now he's going to think it's me. He's going to murder me. And I was like, I'm so, whatever. So so Rick gets off, and the MC goes on. He goes, I just want to. He doesn't even do any jokes. He goes, I just want you to know that Poveromo was the one who leaned on the lights. So I was like, fuck. But Ray was like, and of course he brings me up or whatever. And then I would, but Rick was like, he was still just super nice. You know what I mean? I thought, I thought I was getting murdered that night, but I was like, hey man, I'm so sorry. He's like, don't worry about it. I was like,
No, he's a great guy.
Yeah,
Great
he's
guy.
super, super nice, and was nice to me for the rest of the time I knew him too. Another weird Rick story too is walking down the street, because when you're in New York, like you pass by, you're going from club to club, you run into the comics. He is sitting with I guess this girl he was dating at the time in like one of those cafes that has glass windows that look out into the city, and I'm walking by, and out of just my peripheral or whatever, this maniac banging on the glass window, and I was like, don't fucking look at it, whatever. But like, he was like, John, and then I was like, and he's like, hey, come here, and it was him, and then he just introduced me to his girl, which I thought was nice, because again, I was like a nothing, whatever, and he's like, this guy's funny. It was so random, so weird, but I guess I don't know, maybe he was having a bad date, and he's like, I'd like anybody to come in off the street, even if I don't know you. But yeah, he was really cool, dude. That's awesome, though. That's cool that it turned into a documentary. Are you planning on any other films?
Well, I am writing. I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed. We'll see. We'll see.
I feel like you've got a lot of stuff going on too, because I was surprised you said earlier that you were taking a writing class. You got your podcast that you're working on. You have working on a book. You're putting all of us to shame, because that's a lot. Like, I feel like not many people did anything during the pandemic, and you're like,
oh, I feel like the biggest loser on the
really?
planet. Yeah, 100%. Well, because I had my podcast, and we were going gangbusters. I made spun a bunch of animations off that thing, like with Bobby Lee and a bunch of people, Eleanor Kerrigan, Josh Wolf. But just after the pandemic, my partner had to leave town, and then you know how it is. Everyone struggled, and so but it's hard. It's hard to self-start.
Of course. Yeah,
you guys know. So
exactly. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
You've been in the podcast thing for a while. You had a monster podcast with Joey Diaz, right? Beauty and the Beast, and then. So, like, you've been doing it since before it was as trendy as it is now. Have you seen like a lot of variants since 10 years ago when you first were kicking it off?
Well, it's easier to figure out now how to put it up. You know what I mean? Like when we were doing it, it was kind of a little bit it was harder to figure out to, just actually getting it up on iTunes and all time. I thought was difficult. And when I stopped doing comedy, I did a lot of photography. I stopped for about 10 years, and I worked at a digital capture firm. So I had a pretty good understanding of things like that. And I still thought it was pretty hard. But I think that when you're doing a podcast, you just have to have, now you could get away with just having comics on it, but it seems like now you have to, like you guys have a little bit of a theme. You have to have kind of a theme. And when I did the Liars Club, it was like, I had worked with John Fugelsang on some political show called Comedy Nation.
Yes.
And I rode that one pretty hard, and I just got to the point where I just wanted to do a silly podcast. You know what I mean? With Joey, it was a great learning experience on how to be spontaneous. I try to be a little bit more controlled with stuff, and working with him was a great experience on just how to be spontaneous and not take yourself so serious and not worry about things being so technically correct, because people will forgive sloppiness for a genuine experience. So that was a big learning thing through Beauty and the Beast. And then doing the Comedy Nation thing was so, like, you had to be so correct on all your politics. So it was a big learning curve in being able to even explain yourself or talk correctly about politics. And it was such a serious thing, and it was so angry making. So not the experience of obviously working with John Fugelsang, who's just amazing in his own right. John Fugelsang there's so many amazing comics and so many genres, and he just shines in his, and he is so giving and kind, and so that was a great experience. But it's been so much fun with my friend Jessica Wellington. She's one of the first door guys at the Comedy Store, the first door guy at the Comedy Store that was a girl. And so the thing about a podcast, as you guys know, is just connection. Do you make each other laugh? And we could sit here and just laugh about anything. And it was actually a game. So you just tell 2 stories. It's not genius. You tell 2 stories. One is the truth, one is a lie.
Yeah.
We try to figure out which one is a lie. It's old school, but it was just fun to enjoy comedy in just a silly way again. You know what I mean? So I feel very lucky that I had that opportunity. We did it at the Comedy Store and had support from the Comedy Store. But now we're just trying to find our way back in, you know, as everybody is, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you said you need to have some kind of a hook too, because I think I really just wanted to talk to people while the world was kind of falling apart, but Dystopia Tonight seemed to be like the best thing or whatever. And I find it like I did the intro thing with like a bunch of shit that's going on, or that was going on at the time, right? And then it's funny because I feel like I don't care what the guest wants to talk about, but there's sometimes where like people see that intro and they're like, we're going to talk about Israel Palestine, you know, or whatever. And then they roll up their sleeves and I'm like, it could be anything though. I'm just throwing in it because like, it is just nice to have fun and take like a break from, you know, whatever. And I do John Fugelsang's show all the time. That tell me everything.
He's a great guy.
He is, but but it's one of those things where like, he's so fucking smart and so.
Oh my God, he's so smart. If you say something stupid, he'll call you out on it, and you're like, "Yeah, bro, I'm sorry about that." You're like, "Yeah, you're right. I should have fucking knew what a neocon was." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And it's so fucking, and it's one of those things where like I'll go on, and he's had me on like all through the pandemic, nice enough where I don't even have to go in studio and stuff like that. I just call on the phone, but he'll give me these intros that are like smart, funny, and I'm like, just please don't say I'm smart. Like, where I'm just like, for the love of God, don't build me up. Like, because he's just like, you know, I mean, it doesn't miss a beat.
You know what I love about comedy? I love how many genres there are, and I love how people shine at different things. And John Fugelsang, and I'll tell you who else, Ida Rodriguez.
Oh, yes.
Those two shine in a way that I don't know how they do it. Like, it's one thing to be sassy on a podcast and make a few points, but I've seen those guys like at Politicon, like debating like people you see on the news. Like, what they do is so amazing. Like, I could never do that. You know what I mean? Like when you hang around people and you're like, I can't do that. And you're like, well, what can I do? You know, like, what can I do? You know,
he does it at such a level and a speed. It's kind of fun because I do enjoy that kind of stuff, and I like the you know, political edge and talking to people about stuff or whatever. And I wrote this article for Newsweek that he loved or whatever, and it still intimidates the shit out of me going on there because I just know that whatever I think I know, he knows it. He knows it in a way that's inside out. And I'm like, and I just want to be like, how the fuck do you find the time, or is your brain just functioning like that? It's wild. It's so, and like even when he takes we do the, you know, the callers for the guests or whatever that call in at the end of the night, even that he handles them with grace and just whatever. And meanwhile, I'm like knuckle biting because I'm annoyed at, you know, some, you know, Trump supporter for calling in, and John's just like fact, whatever, and then handles him nicely, and I'm like, I'm raging. I don't know what you're talking about, John. Like, like it's the craziest shit.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's really just so incredibly talented.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it took me. Did you have anybody that you were starstruck by, like genuinely, like when you were coming up, or were you kind of like, whatever?
You know, because I had such blinders on at a young age, and I grew up as an Army brat, and my mother, even though my dad was in the Army, he married a German chick. So we lived a lot overseas because he would always try to put in for overseas so she could be closer to her family, my mother. And so there's a lot of cultural references I didn't get as a young adult because I was overseas, you know, and so I wasn't that starstruck because when I was doing it, I was just trying to get to the next day. So I had blinders on. But now looking back, I'll tell you and I tell people this all the time, who I'm completely starstruck about. And it's Elaine Boozler.
Oh, wow.
Elaine Boozler. I think it's a fucking crime that there are some comedians that aren't given their due. And I think Elaine Boozler is one of those comedians, because I can be like, women don't get shit, blah, 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 all day long. And then she'll put up a clip from like 1984 where she's fucking rocking a theater and wearing like the coolest fucking outfits. And she's in pictures with like every great comedy star since the fucking 68. You know what I mean? Like she really broke down a lot of doors, and like her living boyfriends were like Andy Kaufman, Robin Williams. Like, she fucking saw all that and held her own. And I think it's a crime that comedians, not only comedians, but women comedians, don't give her due.
I agree. That's 100%
so I'm completely starstruck by her, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, she's incredible. And even sometimes like that, like when she'll respond to something she posts stuff all the time, and she just posted a picture of her and Robin Williams and somebody else in her apartment. I don't remember who else was in the photo, but it was like her and Robin hanging out and a couple other people, whatever. And I'll just write back. I'll just write on her Instagram. I'm like, oh my God, it's incredible. And she'll write right back. And I'm just like, oh my God. She's incredible though. And she was just on, I saw a clip of her on Carson, and she said something I thought was super cool, where he'd said like, that's really funny stuff. The ladies will really be able to relate or whatever. And she's like, I hope everybody can relate to what I just said, because what her set was like for everybody. And I think, she didn't need to be, pigeonholed at all in any kind of respect, because she was just killer. All her material was just
groundbreaker in her own right.
Funny.
And then I think about like women like Rusty Warren. Like like if any woman ever has done a dirty joke on stage, they have a Rusty Warren to thank, because a lot of comedy came up through like body bar songs, you know what I mean? Like, and she had like a song called Tits Up, but it was the first time that a woman could be that aggressive sexually and kind of funny. And I mean, I think people like that deserve their due,
I completely agree. And you did Jessica Carson's documentary, right? Or was I not?
No, I didn't. I wasn't a part of that, and I haven't watched it, but it's on my list to watch. Jessica Carson, fucking genius.
Yeah.
I love that Bill helped her with her. Didn't he help her with her Comedy Central special?
He did. He gave her a Comedy Central special, which is fucking awesome. She's going to be on the show tomorrow night, and she's like one of my all-time favorites. Helped me when I was younger. Nicest person, super fucking funny. But yeah, just dominates. It's incredible.
Yeah. I get starstruck by also the young generation coming up. Like, there's some people who are writing jokes where you're like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
Like Liza Traeger, or someone like Erica. Liza's fucking nuts.
Yeah, she's so good.
And is it Lisa or Liza? It's Lisa. Is it Lisa or Liza?
I think it's Lisa.
Lisa Traeger, yeah.
Yeah.
She's an amazing comedy writer. I think Erica Rhodes is
so
like
nice, so funny.
Such an amazing, clean writer, and even I just don't mean to be talking about women, but why not? But someone like Karen Rontowski, or here's another one that she gets some due, but she needs more due. Laurie Kilmartin.
Oh yeah,
Laurie Kilmartin, one of the strongest joke writers. If I had a show and I needed jokes, I'd fucking call Laurie Kilmartin.
Yeah, she's amazing. First time I met her was at when I first got out to LA, and I was at Flappers, and she was working out material, and she just fucking, just destroyed. And
her Conan set is if you ever want to do late night, you have to watch her Conan set. That Conan set is the perfect TV set. Perfect TV set. But you know who else I really love that I feel struck about now? And he came up through the alternative scene, and at the time I fucking hated the alternative scene.
Yeah.
But who I admire more than anyone now is he has like one of the best Twitter feeds, Blaine Capatch.
I don't know who that is.
You guys got to follow Blaine Capatch. He's an amazing joke writer. He's an amazing. He'll make you laugh 5 times a day.
Really?
Blaine Capatch.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was it about the alternative scene that you didn't like in the beginning?
Well, because they were all my age and they wouldn't let me in. They'd be, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'd be like, you bitches can only work 3 cities in this whole country, and I'm out there humping my ass, and you're up there with no, I had a whole thing, because they were all like, you're from the old guard. I'd be like, bitch, we're the same age, They were totally right. It needed to be changed.
Yeah.
But it was a shitty cup of coffee to drink on that, man.
I know what you mean. It is kind of like that. It depends on who you hang out with, because it's still I mean, there's no there is kind of like an alt scene, but there's a lot of scenes that just kind of blend together or whatever at this point. And it is kind of funny because if you hang out with certain people, they automatically either have a stigma against you or they think that you're, because I got moved. I didn't do bringers for very long, and because of that, I wasn't around a lot of the younger comics that I should have been around. I should have been, whatever, but I got taken out on the road by a headliner early on. And then I got I worked through doing that kind of stuff because I got better on the road and then came back. So I didn't have to do any bringer shit. And then from that point on, I was kind of like ostracized from the group who had to still bring like 15 people. And on one hand, I was like, fuck you. I don't want to bring 15 of my stupid friends to this thing or whatever.
Right.
But I feel like I missed out on stuff sometimes.
Yeah, because they all became big writers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm still humping the clubs. They showed me.
That's fucking hilarious. Oh, that's the best. That's the best line on this podcast so far. Not this one. I mean, all of them. Imagine if I said that about this one. Best line so far the whole hour. No, I have all the podcasts. Well, it's been so great to talk to you. I wish we had, like if you want to stay, you can stay. But if not, I just want it's been an hour and 10 minutes I've kept you.
Well, I think people probably have had enough of me, but you guys are awesome. Does this gentleman over here never talk? This guy over here?
Me up here? No,
he does. Yeah, he talks a lot. He'll chime in whenever whenever he feels like chiming in. I don't know when he says something.
Whenever he feels like chiming in. No, I do talk a lot, but
he does.
When John's on a roll, I let him go, and I'm just enjoying it. I'm enjoying everything. The only question I had for you before you go: do you speak numerous languages, like from growing up as an army brat?
I speak a little bit of German. That's about it.
That's fun.
Which is not helpful anywhere. Doesn't get you anything.
Not in a social setting.
Nothing.
Right.
No.
My stepdad was over in Germany when he was in like Vietnam, like stationed out there or whatever, and every now and then he would scream something in German and I would just be like, that's frightening. I don't know what you just said, but I am legitimately terrified.
Here's the thing, like whenever you go on vacation somewhere outside the country and you hear someone talking a foreign language and you're like, ooh, they're always German. You're like, German.
Oh, God. Oh, I have one more question before you go. I ask everybody this. So if you had one piece of advice to give yourself, your younger self, what would it be?
Oh, trust yourself.
Oh, that's very nice.
Trust yourself.
That was so
Trust
sweet.
yourself.
That was, yeah.
Well, because particularly in comedy, but I think this applies to anything that you choose to do. I went through this phase as a young person where I was always questioning, is this what I'm meant to do? Maybe I should be doing something else. Am I meant to do this? And then when I went away from comedy and I came back, it was like, yes, this is what I'm meant to do. So trust yourself when, because every experience counts,
Wow.
So trust yourself.
I love that. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming on. It's nice to meet you virtually.
Thank you
Hopefully I'll get to do it in person.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Very nice to meet you, man.
Yep.
That says nothing.
Such a pleasure. I promise next time you're on, I'm going to do nothing but talk.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so very much.
Dystopia tonight.